The World Economic Forum describes the fourth industrial revolution as a new chapter in human development that contains both huge promises and potential peril. How do you see countries on the African continent being part of this fourth industrial revolution? And how do you think, or how do you suggest they will be able to manage these so-called perils?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Fungai. I think when you look at the African continent and you realize the fact that we have the largest youth population, that is, we're going to be the largest youth population in a couple of years, because this industrial revolution started quite a while back. I think we have this wonderful opportunity to level the playing field by utilizing our young people. When we talk about the young people in this generation, we're obviously talking about people who are well educated, not only because our systems have given them that education, but also they're well read. They're always kind of pushing to be at the top in whatever they're doing. And I think when you look at the fourth industrial revolution, which really starts to talk about how we move away from the traditional arithmetics, English, maths as being the future, and being this creative, collaborative, being able to introduce our young people to that is where the opportunity lies. And I think the society, or should I say the structures that be in these African countries, needs to realize that the power is in the youth. When I talk about youth, I also talk about not just age youth, but I mean youthful minds, which I'm always criticized for, because people say I'm 50 and I'm still a youth in mind. But it's having this thinking that, look, we're young, we're able, we have the ability to do it. I think if we talk about it from maybe an age perspective, when we talk about young people, and we're talking about young people still in, say, school, primary school, and so on, there's also a wonderful opportunity to start to introduce these other ways of thinking that are not just purely based on getting an A and a B at GCSEs or whatever O levels, as they put it, and starting to introduce this idea of by solving problems early on, you are teaching young people that value comes from solving problems, not from just cramming how to certain stats. It's in solving problems, collaborating to solve those problems, learning in different ways that's not limited to just books and what you learn in class, but YouTube being an incredible resource, which is sometimes free in different countries in Africa. Absolutely. It's just teaching the young people to realize that we're not limited anymore by how much you've book studied. It's about where you can apply your skills to solve a problem. So I think that's where the industry needs to move towards, to start to see value in young people and their ability to solve problems for their generation and beyond.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because COVID has forced us into that anyway, isn't it? And we are saying in the West, we have kind of realized the potential and we have maintained the momentum. But what I can see is that African countries are kind of curling back and going back to their old ways of doing things. Yes. So how do we ensure, or what is it that we can be doing maybe as companies or as employers to make sure that we are clinging on to this change and we are forcing ourselves to now make this opportunity the normal? And for people who want to be entrepreneurs, how can they make sure that they make this the normal?
It's a great question, and it maybe reminds me of a scenario. So when I first thought of investing in Zimbabwean youth in terms of just for our business, I remember at the time thinking, we have this, within the company I was in, there was myself, I was a coder, self-taught it is, and there was another coder who was from Zimbabwe. There was a team, we have a team in the UK, and then we thought, well, we need to expand. And at the time we were looking at Malaysia, we're looking at other countries, purely because of time zones and all of that, but also just value for money. And when I remember looking back on Zim, I quickly realized that the people were there, they just weren't given the opportunity to say, I'm here.
Right.
And let me explain that a little bit more. So when I come back to your question of how companies can help that, a lot of the young people in Zim that we met and interviewed were in companies where it was kind of top-down hierarchy.
Okay.
Yeah, the boss says, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Now, you might know better, you might have a better idea. And I remember one guy saying to me, I'm so used to not raising a concern because the minute I do, I become the concern.
Right.
Right? And that is so telling in how they think about their ability and their talent.
But isn't that about the culture?
It has 100% to do with the culture,
right,
and how the culture is being interpreted by the young people, because it kind of says, you're not able to do it without me, the boss, or me, the company, or whatever. So to answer your question earlier, I think empowering the young people to believe in themselves is where the opportunity is.
Okay.
Businesses need to realize that they've invested in bringing in young people with creative minds and the abilities, they've trained them, and now it's time to give them the controls. It's time to say, look, okay, you make the decision, I'll back you, and I'll support you, but I trust you.
Really? In the African context?
That's where the solution is. It's going to be difficult, but that's where it has to happen.
Remember, in our culture, dad speaks and you listen.
Tell me.
Yeah?
Yes.
There is no conversation. And now that culture is transferred into the workplace. The boss is the boss. You do as the boss says.
Yes.
But you are saying that we need to change that mindset piece to say, okay, as bosses, we need to listen. Allow the minds of those young people to be creative and innovative, and then we take on board the creativity and the innovation and give them those opportunities. But I think there's going to need to be a cultural shift.
It's definitely a cultural shift, and that cultural shift starts with what you're consuming. So if you're if I was giving advice to a company right now, I'd be saying the directors, managers, all of them need to start to consume what the young people are consuming, right? Because there's an element of this which is to do with being in an environment where you are told, where you're seeing others conforming to the past, I guess is a way to put it, and you settle back into that. So when I look at the difference between young people, when I say young people, I mean people who are say out of university, can't find a job, but have the creative skills to do stuff, and say the incumbents already in those jobs and doing their thing. If you look at specifically in Africa and specifically in Zimbabwe, maybe, there's an element of, I need to hold on to my job. To do that, I need to be the boss. I need to be in control. Right? If you speak above me, you might show your ability that you are better than me. And that culture results in this idea of a toxic environment, actually, where I think one of my guys we recruited was just said, look, I was in a toxic environment where I wasn't allowed to think, right? I just do what I'm told. And as long as I keep and conform, I keep my job.
We're ready.